Hello, my name's Teresa Arrowwood, and I'm the author of Standing in the Eye of the Storm. And this is the second book in the series. You can see that. This is Stealing the Thunder, and it is the second part of Standing in the Eye of the Storm. I'm sorry, I can't get it right in the camera. There you go. These books are, I guess, graphic in some points to some people because it deals with the subject of abuse. The reason I wrote these books was because I see a lot of that kind of thing, and I've seen it over the past 30 some years in nursing of how people are affected by abuse. I can't take credit for these books, although I am the one that I did write these stories, but I think the stories were given to me by God. So these are God's stories, not mine. I would really like to see these books be taken out and actually used for good. The content is dark in some places, and it's not meant for everybody, but I do recommend that the teenage girls do read some of this, just for the sheer fact that they are of dating age, and there are abusive people out there regardless of what age they are. And it doesn't have to be a male-female type thing. It can be of the same sex, because people do abuse mentally, physically, and sexually. These books are meant for a teaching tool. They are meant for comfort. There is information at the back of the books that tell you how to get help if you are in need of help from an abusive situation. I thought I would give you a little bit of a treat out of these books and give you an idea of what they're like. And maybe read an excerpt out of the book. I'm not much of one to read in public. I don't read out loud much, so if I stumble over some words, even though they are my own writings and I know what's here, I ask you to be patient with me and just kind of listen to the words. We'll start with the prologue, and if it goes well, I may end up putting a chapter or two online just to give you an idea of what they're like. Okay. This is the prologue, and it tells of what happened before Carter had lost his parents. Alonzo Moretti Davis was looking sharp in his black tux as he stood waiting for his wife to kiss the children goodbye. They had waited for this night for the last few years. Miriam didn't seem to trust any one person with the children, and it made it difficult for them to go out alone. Tonight was different. Alonzo had the perfect venue picked for their anniversary. He had looked forward to it and planned it down to the second of each activity he wanted to share with her. If it had been up to him, they would have taken at least the night to spend together. They hadn't been alone since before the birth of their son. He missed the time he had been able to be alone with her, but he loved that she embraced motherhood. He loved his children, and Miriam would have given her last breath for them. He watched her with a grin as he listened to the instructions she ticked off to Mrs. Rosen. Each instruction was laid out in order of importance. Alonzo had to laugh as he listened to her overly protective wife. Miriam, if we don't leave, we aren't going to be on time. Besides, Mrs. Rosen knows what she's doing. His wife had smiled, and her brown eyes danced as she admired him. Assisting her with her coat, she shrugged it on. His son had looked up in wonderment of him as he assisted his mother. He had always tried to teach his son to treat the women in his life like a delicate flower. From the time he was able to understand, he had told him that women were strong, but they needed attention and love. It was their job to see that they were protected and well taken care of. He winked at his boy, and he knew that he had gotten the message when he had given him a sheepish grin and saluted his father as they walked out the door. As they drove toward the riverfront restaurant, Alonzo talked with Miriam, and they both had smiled and laughed as they remembered how they had met. The ice on the windshield had reminded him of the day she had walked into the cafe where he was sitting after a class. She had walked in the little cafe, preparing for her shift at Whitecap's Java. She had just rounded the counter when he had noticed her. He had known her shift by then like the back of his hand, and had made a point to be there. He had never gotten up enough courage to ask her out, but he was determined that was going to change. He had watched her all through their freshman year of college, just waiting his turn between boyfriends, and this was his chance. He had thought many times over that she hadn't noticed that he was around, acting mostly like the young men didn't matter, but they were attracted to her like bees to honey. Walking over to the table next to him, she had slid on a patch of water. The iced coffee she carried had spilled on the floor at her feet. Before she had hit the floor, he had reached out to catch her, and she had fallen back into his arms and against his chest. I guess you could say that the opportunity had inadvertently fallen into his lap. She gasped as she had seen him looking down on her. Her doe-brown eyes were large and hypnotizing, leaving him unable to speak a word for a moment. "I'm so sorry," she had said, and tried to push up from where she had landed. He wanted to assist her up, but he couldn't let go of her. She hadn't offered to get up again, and he hadn't bent down and kissed her. The tray that was now empty skidded to the floor among the coffee and ice. Her kiss left him breathless. She had him from the moment she looked at him. Her eyes remained wide as she remained silent and had caressed his cheek. "I guess I have to marry you now and make an honest woman of you." Miriam wasn't sure how to react. She was stunned from his remark and continued to hold on to him as the patrons of the shop looked on at them. The stares hadn't made much difference as she was cradled in his arms. All had become right with the world from that moment. Picking up her hand, he placed it to his lips and pressed a soft kiss against it. "I love you, Miriam. I would have never thought you would have gone for a guy like me." And what was wrong with a guy like you?" Miriam had prompted him. "You know, I didn't have much at the time, and I was so backward." "Yes, but that was the part of what made you so charming. The material things didn't matter to me. I would have gone out with you any time. You hadn't noticed me before that day in the cafe," he laughed. "You were too busy with Bob, Bill, whatever his name was, Brandon. And yes, I was. You just hadn't ever gotten around to asking me out." "Well, I'm glad I did. I can't imagine my life without you." "Or I you." Miriam squeezed his hand as he studied the road in the darkness of that winter night. "What do you think of Elijah? Isn't he becoming the charmer?" "He's a carbon copy of you, Alonzo, even at his tender age. I'm surprised that the little girls aren't falling all over him. You have taught him well." "Yeah, the lady killer," Alonzo had laughed, and he could see the smile on his wife's face from the corner of his eye. "I just hope when he grows up he knows how to love and appreciate a young lady." "I'm sure that you will teach him well. You haven't done so bad yourself. You are the charmer, Mr. Davis." "Well, it wasn't because my father was there to teach me." "You can't blame him, Alonzo. He was just a boy when you were born. My mother was a young girl without any support, but she managed without him. My father doesn't even know where I am or my name. I'm not sure that he's alive. All he ever did from the time I remember was drink. Give him a benefit of the doubt. It wasn't easy to raise a child at his age. Mama was 15, Miriam. My father had a responsibility, and he walked out on us. I'm surprised that I turned out as well as I have. Alonzo reached over his chest and adjusted the sidearm he had strapped against him, and continued driving through the snow and slush of the semi-dark night. The lights approached him at a rapid speed, and as he had tried to adjust his thinking of what was happening, he had placed an arm over his wife as if she were a child. Miriam had not noticed as she was placing lipstick over her pale lips. Move! Alonzo gritted his teeth as he had seen there was nowhere to go but off the road. The driver of the car was headed straight for them. The high beams of the light reflected on him as it illuminated the interior of the car like daylight. Hold on, Miriam, Alonzo had said in a cool voice. Her scream had filled the car as it skidded. Alonzo had tried to veer it out of the path of the oncoming vehicle, but it had been in vain. The car hit a patch of ice, and it had thrown them directly into the other car's path sideways, being hit on the passenger side door. The impact had thrown Miriam over into Alonzo's lap, snapping her seatbelt in two pieces. Alonzo had tried to protect his wife as he held to her, trying to steer the car out of the path of the driver. He had died instantly. The car had pushed once it was hit into a ditch. The impact had broken his neck. Miriam had survived, but only for minutes, after the crew arrived to retrieve her from the twisted vehicle. The last thing that she had said prior to her death was Elijah's name. I hope that you'll pick this up and read it. If you haven't read the first book, please read it before you read this one. And like most readers, please don't read the last page. It gives things away, and you really need to read the rest of the book. Drop by at Amazon.com and pick them up today. They're $2.99 for Kindle version, and I believe that the paperback versions are $15. The prices may vary on different sites. Thank you, and I appreciate your following.